His Well, are we live? There we go. All right, everybody. Good to have you with us. We're going to be continuing in our study of the life of David. You want to go ahead and open up your Bibles to chapter 15, 2 Samuel, chapter 15. We're going to continue there. Last week, we had no online class, but we covered it here in the building. So we're going to do a little bit of review on it. The meat of it is where we're really getting into anyway, looking at some more detail, and I'll pull out some of those things too. So I encourage you, if you're online, whether Facebook or YouTube, if you want to, I'm watching the chat. I can see what's going on. And I think the audio should be really good tonight. I think we finally got it to where it was almost too loud, which is very unusual. So I'm real happy. That stresses me out more than you could ever imagine. So let some people get in. I know I haven't seen the Haynes yet, but yeah, we've been having some pretty good conversations. I hope tonight you guys will be involved and join in on the class. Yeah, and if the audio sounds good and you're watching, shoot me a text. Says sounds good, sounds bad, what you think about it to help me so I know, because I'm watching it on a television here after I upload it, so it may sound different. I know when I go home, I watch it and it sounds different, but I really do need to know. I mean, if it sounds good, does it sound better than the best we've had? Because I've been trying to really get it better for you. Sound and audio is one of the one things that we just can't tolerate when it's not good. We can look at video that's a little rough and stuff, but it's been proven by studies that if the audio isn't right, people will just stop. They won't listen. That's kind of the way we are when we're talking to somebody. If I can't really hear them, we kind of ignore them, don't we? We just kind of like drift off because it's like, well, I can't really understand them. I do that to my grandkids all the time because I don't understand that language they speak. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So last week we were taking a look at Absalom's conspiracy and the coup that he tries to pull off. So we're going to review a little bit of last week and look at that. And so in 15 verses 1 through 6, we see where Absalom, after his return from exile, he comes back and he's stuck for 2 years, not being able to go see his father. He finally burns Joab's field, which then gets Joab's attention, who then gets the king's attention. And it seems like things are all good, but they're really not, because the very next part we see is, welcome, Haynes. Good to see you here. I hope the audio is good. Carol, can you hear me? So I bumped it up so I can make sure we're getting out there. So we saw that once he started in chapter 15, that immediately once he's been kind of sort of reconciled, I think forgiven, but not really restored, there's always been something between him and his father that's not being restored. And I think some of it is spiritual guilt on David's side, not acting, and Absalom has a lot to be bitter about. He's a product of his environment, I think. There's a part of that he's been raised in a family of sin all around him, all the things that have been happening, but he hasn't handled it well either, and his arrogance is going to be shown what's going to happen. He's been described as a very beautiful, handsome man, one that stood high, tall. The average height was apparently 5'6" or so in that day and age. So they say he could have been up to close to, they estimate, like 6 foot, 5'10". So for a man, he was really tall, had this gorgeous hair. We saw a description of his hair was something like 5 pounds when he cut it once a year. So he had this thick hair, beautiful GQ, type of guy. Almost reminds me of Saul, a man who everybody looked at and said, yeah, that guy, wow, he's awesome. And they would follow him. But we already know God has expressed the fact that it's not about the outside, is about the inside, and that's why he picked David, and he told them that. So we kind of see this, I think, happening again, where one of the ways I think he's able to creep in and build up this type of support is because he has this type of personality, and the people are attracted to that naturally. We see that still happening, and we forget that we need to be looking at the inside of a man's heart and not just the outside as well. And so he sets himself up in this big type of a parade where he comes down through Jerusalem with horse and chariots and 50 men around him, goes to the gate which is where the elders would come and they would discern problems that people would bring to them. That was a part of the law, that people would bring them to the city gates where the elders would be, kind of like the city council or city hall. And while he's there, he starts kind of, talking about, wow, if I was king, if there was just somebody who could speak for the king, I would be able to do justice and everything. And he really started, you talk about politician, wow. I mean, he starts really kissing up to these guys. I mean, just gooing all over them and making them feel good about themselves. And when somebody would reach out to shake his hand, he would grab it and kiss it like he cared, and really starts to work up everyone and starts to spread. Now, if everybody's coming from the urban or the rural areas, a lot of this influence is going out. So over the years, we see that this finally comes to a point where he then is going to ask his dad if he can go down to Hebron. And at Hebron, he is going to then say he's going to offer a sacrifice, a vow that he said he made when he was still in Gusher, where his grandfather was when he was in exile for killing his brother. So, and I still haven't been able to really resolve the difference between the 40 or 4 years. I didn't really find anything different things. So, don't know. Got an idea? Let me know. So, we see Absalom sends in secret messages in verse 10 throughout all the tribes, and he sets up a key word that he's going to have released, sound off. It's going to let everybody know that the coup has started. He wants everybody to basically acknowledge him as being the king, and let everybody start to make that transition that he is going to be accepted. Now, Hebron's not an accident. Hebron's a very important point of reference because that's where David, when he came in and when Saul was killed, and he, instead of coming in to anywhere else, he first takes over and they establish him, the tribe of Judah establishes him as king. And he ruled there for 7.5 years before he then went up and all the tribes were united. I think Absalom may be using this because that's where he's from. I mean, he's from the tribe of Judah as well, and he is from Hebron. So that's where he was born. So this is a good place to start type of rebellion, as well as one of the lead advisors to David is going to help advise Absalom in this. And I don't know what happened to him, why he becomes that way. His chief counselor, Ahithophel, he starts to advise Absalom after this, and he says down in verse 12, when Absalom was offering sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor from his city Gihon, and the conspiracy grew strong, and the people with Absalom kept increasing. So it's spreading fast. There's a large population of people who are accepting this. It just kind of reminds me that, were they really looking in the heart of Absalom? If they would just think back for a moment, they would go back in time and think to themselves, this is the guy that murdered his brother, and there was no justice. This is like somebody who has committed a vicious crime in America. Oh, wait. I was going to say, a lot of our politicians are crooks, aren't they? I guess I can't hold them to that one. But you know what I mean. If somebody got away with such a hideous, even today, a politician, if they really had murdered somebody and then they never went to trial, everybody knew it, the evidence was there. Just think about, let's say, O.J. Simpson. I don't know, but I think the majority of people don't believe that justice was carried out that way. But then to have him rise up and then that person become a great leader and you start to follow him, it shows you that you're not looking within the heart of this man. So Absalom does that. He's able to do this and raise up this. And then so when the message comes to David, when he finds out about this uprising coming at him, he just seems to tuck tail and run. And that's kind of interesting to me. I know there's a couple of things we talked about. Again, I think the spiritual guilt of that this is something that I've inflicted on myself because it's the part of the sword that's going to be living in my house, the way that Nathan had told me. But he's been doing that for almost everything that's happened in his family, it seems like. Everything that has happened, from the rape of Tamar, his daughter, to the murder of Ammon, Absalom's brother, to bringing no justice to Absalom, then turning around and treating Absalom the way he did, it doesn't give you the right to just not do anything. Yes, you're going to have the consequences, but you have to still take action. So that's something that I keep bringing up because I think that's important. So what he says in verse 13 and 14 of chapter 15 is he says, "And a messenger came to David saying, 'The hearts of men of Israel have gone after Absalom.' And David said to all the servants who were with him and Absalom, 'Arise and let us flee, or else there will be no escape for us from Absalom. Go quickly, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down ruin on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword.'" So two things he says. One, the message says, Absalom has won the hearts of everyone. Sometimes evil wins the hearts of a lot of people, but it doesn't mean that it makes it right. And that's something that I thought of as I was looking at these verses here was, just because everybody's going after Absalom, you just, okay, well, popularity vote, time for me to go. We know that's not right. But there's something as well that I think the last part that I underlined here in the verse was, he says, let's get out of here quick, because if we don't, there's going to be a battle. There's going to be violence that's going to come on the city, and more people and innocent people are going to be harmed than if I get away from the city and if he comes after me, which he has to come after him. You have to kill the king. So David, I think, in his wisdom is saying, I would rather this take place away from the city. I also think that David, being the shrewd military person he was, where did he fight? He was a guerrilla fighter. He fought out in the wilderness. That's where his mind was and his tactics and everything, not the type of urban warfare where you get tied down in the cities and buildings and stuff like that. No, he was very good at maneuvering out in the wilderness, and this is exactly where he goes. So he hasn't completely collapsed and just given up and say, well, I'm going to just go lay down outside the walls of the city and just wait for him to come out and kill me. But he does have respect for the city. And we see the way, and that's why I think that's why he left, was because of the fact that, one, he knew where to fight. He knew that he was going to bring more harm. And also, we see this interesting point where he takes and sends back the ark, which is the presence of God. Man, you're in trouble. Don't you want God with you? Just saying, I would think, I want the ark of God with me. But, when you look at the way that he says, talks about that, he doesn't see it that way at all. Yeah, I'm going to do something. Hold on. Make that decision in a way. Yeah, I think that's a good thought, that he didn't want to have this engagement and have to make that type of a war with his son. David is a tormented soul. Isn't that interesting? That we've seen that when it comes to Saul. And when he had the opportunity, when he was being pursued, and that if it would have been the other way around, Saul would have killed him. But when it was David had the advantage, he said, no, he's the anointed. And even his own men. Yeah. Yeah, so you see that kind of jumping ahead in the story. No, you're right. Because I think that, don't worry, because I think that helps to show why he made this decision. If you understand the end of the story, which was he grieved heavily when Absalom died. And I think that helps to support, Becky, what you're saying, where, he didn't want it to come to this. But there really wasn't going to be a good resolution because of the way it is. So I think that the other thing, I don't know, this is extremely manipulative on my part. But if you let things look normal, like you've taken over power and you're not missing anything, then you just feel really good. I've got your priest, I've got your advisors, I've got the ark of God. I'm good. I'm the king. I've got your concubine. There's a part where Absalom could start feeling a little confident, overconfident. I don't know, but I know that would be a part of it. I know that Absalom and his ego would feel very empowered. And we're going to see that when he talks about, when he challenges the priests when they come back, and he asks them, wait a minute, what are you doing here? Why aren't you with my father? He's your friend. And they pledge allegiance to him. So he likes that. He didn't question it anymore. And he just takes him in without any second thought. So, and now this next phase is the journey and the traveling out that I think is very sad when you see this exit out as they start to leave and as they travel out. And and everybody is weeping. You see them in a very, humble position, the clothing, everything about the way they're doing. They're weeping, they're sad, and he's watching everybody go by. And he engages with them, he talks with them. And one of them, he says, why don't you just go back? You just got here. And now the people that were listed with him, without going back too much, the Kerethites and the Pelethites, those were his personal bodyguards. So 600 or so plus more that he had as a fighting force. And these guys were good, solid soldiers. I don't know what Absalom has. He does have Joab, which is interesting. Let's remember him. That's an interesting. What happens to Joab during this? No. I know. Where is he? Where's Joab? It gets quiet. And we know that he doesn't like Absalom. The only reason he brought Absalom back was because the king was moping around and not being functional. Because then whenever Absalom does come back, he won't even talk to him. Absalom had to burn it down. So Joab is the military commander, just to remind you, David's like commander-in-chief of his forces. It's been with him from the time they were in the cave. And it seems that he's silent. We'll pick up. He's going to come back and play a very important role and show the good old Joab that he is. But as they pass through, then we see that the Gittite, Ittai, is the one who had just arrived. And he says, why don't you just go back? So he's having these very emotional encounters with all these people as he's journeying through the city, as he's going out of the city, basically. And that's when then we see the ark come up. Verse 23, it says, and they wept aloud as the people passed by. They all stood there weeping. And the king then crossed the brook of Kidron, and all the people passed towards the wilderness. So they're heading basically northeast, and out of the city up the Kidron Valley. And I'm going to show you some pictures of that. And that's when he then finds out as well that his close advisor that he had from all the way back in the days of Hebron, when he first started ruling as king down in Judah, Abiathar come up and he said, behold, Zadok also came with all the Levites, and they're bearing the ark. And this is when he turns them around and tells him to go back. And he says to Zadok, you're a seer, you're a prophet. So I want you to go back, take the ark, act like things are good, proclaim your allegiance to him. But because you're a prophet of God, he's going to recognize that, and he's going to listen to you. Because he's going to take your advice, and basically setting up the idea that where he can usurp his advisor that he's trying to, Ahithophel. He's the one that was among the conspirators. And David, in verse 31, said, O Lord, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. And then as they come up to the summit where God was worshipped, now depending on the translation, there are some that say where he worshiped. The NIV says where people worship. I think he worshiped. The reason is because it's just another geographical point, and I think that as you get to the top, one of the things, I have a picture here I want to share with you. This is an actual picture from Mount of Olives looking back. This would be David's view. Well, except for the Temple Mount. which is the mosque. But that doesn't even exist. If you really look at this, there's a lot that's not there. So I'm going to eliminate. If you look here, all of this here was a part of the newer Jerusalem. This is where Solomon builds the temple. But so the old city of David is a part of these original walls over here. So as David departs and travels down, and you can see, I don't think this is the one path, but you can just see the descent going down into the bottom of the valley. And so they travel north, and then they come up to the top of Mount Olive. And that's where the view he would have. I mean, if you've been climbing and you get to the top of a hill or something, it's just natural for you to look around. This is at night. So you look back and you see the lights of the city there. And what do you see? He's probably seeing the tent of the tabernacle that he set up for the ark, and just a remembrance of all that he did. I mean, he set this city up for God, and now he's having to look at it and leave. This is a very famous hill as well. This is where Jesus teaches from. Just a little further down to your right, the bottom of this is where the Garden of Gethsemane is. He's going to walk right by that area there too. That's what's so amazing. Someday I'd love to be able to go there and see these places because they're so amazing to me. So a lot of this, even though this photo is modern, I thought I'd give you kind of an idea of a dimension of the way it is. So as far as like the path, the way that they're going to take, and I'm going to run you through the entire path. So as we go through it, not jumping back and forth. But in this map here I'm showing you, you see the overall route. Down in the very bottom here, we see Hebron. Now, this is the city where David, when he first became king after Saul died, God instructed him to go there. He ruled 7.5 years there. That's where Absalom's at. But then he starts to come up, and he starts moving towards Jerusalem with his army. That's when David leaves. So the red is David's route as he progresses over. Now, here's a bonus question. I'll give you a real big smiley face. If anybody can tell me what Mahanaim is, this city here, anything significant about this city, Mahanaim. This city here, there's something very fascinating about this city right here. And it wasn't that far in the history. David's familiar with this city, let's put it that way. And when the tribes were divided, ringing bells, give some people some chances to think about it for a moment. Very important city. This is where Abner took Ishbosheth, and he ruled from there. Yeah, isn't that interesting? If it's a good city, well, when we were talking about so what happened is when Saul died, and David then starts to rule in the south with Judah. The 10 northern tribes were in chaos. The Philistines are still invading. And then Abner, King Saul's commanding general, takes Ishbosheth, Saul's son, and installs him as king. What's interesting is he does not bring him back into the tribe of Benjamin, the area that they're from, where Saul was ruling. He moves him across the Jordan and up that river, the river of Jabbok. Well, you have a really fertile valley there, but it's up in a very difficult terrain area. It's difficult to reach out. You're just not that easy to get a hold of. I think that's one of the reasons that Abner knew, I'm going to move him out, and we're going to rule from there because it'll be easier. And plus, the river was a good divider for keeping the Philistines from crossing over and getting there while they were wreaking terror on the 10 northern tribes. So that's what was interesting about that. In the meantime, if you notice, there's only one green little arrow here of when Abner finally does come after him, because he doesn't just pursue David that night. And that's where we will move on. So just a little bit closer up, looking at the route that he takes. This is a very common route. You could have traveled up either side of the river, but this seems to be the one where this is where Abner actually crossed, kind of the southern part after Abner and Joab had their battle, and then Joab was pursuing him at the pool of Gibeon. This is where it's probably close, the same areas where he was at there. I guess I should have pulled that up. That would have made it a little easier for you to see the city there. So this is where it's going to end, in the Forest of Ephraim. And that question mark, not real sure if that's precisely it or not, but historians believe that's probably as close as they can kind of figure out that that's where it's at. So now he has two more encounters as he is traveling out. And these are very important encounters, and I think that's why the details that we've been provided, why they've been written. The first one is Ziba. And so I'm going to go ahead and let's pick up chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. When David had passed a little beyond the summit, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of donkeys saddled, bearing 200 loaves of bread, 100 bunches of raisins, and 100 of summer fruits, and a skin of wine. And the king said to Ziba, "Why have you brought these?" And Ziba said, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and the summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who faint in the wilderness to drink." And the king said, "And where is your master's son?" Which is Mephibosheth. Ziba said to the king, "Behold, he remains in Jerusalem, for he said, 'Today the house of Israel will give me back the kingdom of my father.'" And the king said to Ziba, "Behold, all that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours." And Ziba said, "I pay homage. Let me ever find favor in your sight, my lord the king." So let's stop for just a little bit and talk about this. Ziba and Mephibosheth. Now, Mephibosheth was the last surviving grandson of Saul. Whenever they found out that he was dead, when Saul was killed, the nursemaid was running with him, and he fell and broke his feet, so he became a cripple. And from the time that then David takes over and starts ruling, he's not around. But David had made an oath and a covenant with Jonathan to show kindness to Saul's family. And so after he'd been there in Jerusalem for a while ruling, it dawns on him. He's like, "Oh, isn't there somebody?" And so we have to go back to 2 Samuel 9, 2 and 3, where we see that he's asked about, is there somebody from that house? And so they call this servant in, this Ziba. Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David. And the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I am your servant." And the king said, Is there not still someone of the house of Saul, that I may show kindness of God to him?" So he says, "Yes, there's one more left, Mephibosheth." So he calls him and brings him in, and then we jump down to verses 9 and 10. And then the king called Ziba after he talked to Mephibosheth. Let me fill in there. He brings Mephibosheth in. Mephibosheth is very nervous about the fact that he's being called before David. He figures he's going to get killed. And he says, "No, I'm going to restore you, and I want everything that was your father's to be restored back to you. And you're going to eat at my table, the king's table." And then this is when Ziba comes in, why I jumped over that real amazing story about David and Mephibosheth and that great reconnection and restoring of Mephibosheth, is because then Ziba, he's the one that has Saul's property. This helps us to understand his motivation, what he's doing the night that David is fleeing. Because look at this. Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, "All that belongs to Saul and all to his house I have given to your master's grandson. And you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him and shall bring in the produce. Tell your master's grandson that your master's grandson may have bread to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servant. So he just been put back to serving. And I think this is why he sets this lie up. And that's something that, because it looks like Mephibosheth. That, you notice that David picked up on that. David, when he saw Zebah, he asked him, he goes, where's Mephibosheth? Oh, he's in rebellion. He's figured it out. He thinks that everything now is going to come back to him because he's the only rightful heir to Saul, to his father, who was the last king. That's why you killed all the bloodline, so that this wouldn't happen. There must have been a little bit of David going, but you know what? He knows he's a cripple. He's been eating at his table. And understanding the humility that Mephibosheth demonstrated, this is not believable. If I was David and you're sitting there listening to him, why would he stay behind? You're going to contend with Absalom? Really? Absalom is not going to share the crown with you. If anything, you see, we have two dynasties in conflict here. You have the dynasty of Saul, Mephibosheth, David, and Absalom. What do you think? We're in the middle of a coup by Absalom. So Zebah telling David that Mephibosheth somehow thinks that he's going to get everything restored to the kingdom. He's already got all his grandpa's land and wealth. The only thing that Mephibosheth could want back now is to be a king. And that's why I'm saying, I don't think David, I don't know how much he believes. He's in an emotional turmoil too. So, but I do think this is kind of ridiculous to try to suggest that Mephibosheth, and we know he didn't. That's something else, you talk about the rest of the story. We know, it's going to come out. But boy, doesn't Zebah really kiss up to the king? I mean, the one thing he needed in haste, he needed donkeys, transportation, food, and everything for him. So, he knows what he's doing. So the next encounter, another person, is Shimei. That's what I call him. Shimei? I like Shimei. It sounds like a modern, like a rapper name. No. Shimei. So this is a ridiculous encounter. This really is. And I think that if David wasn't in the right frame of mind, if David was in the right frame of mind, it may have turned out a little bit different. So let's pick up in verses 5 and 8. When David came to Barim, there came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, and the son of Gera. And as he came, he cursed continually, and he threw stones at David and at all the servants of the king of David, and all the people, and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. And Shimei said, "Cursed, get out, you man of blood, you worthless man. The Lord has avenged on you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. See, your evil is on you, for you are a man of blood." I thought that was, first off, what's wrong with this statement? So who is he? Where does he come from? When we look at this. So he's a Benjamite. Yeah. Remember, that was one of the things that Abner was trying to do whenever he was trying to reconcile, was he spoke to all the elders of all the tribes. And then it says, and then he spoke to the tribe of Benjamin, because I think they took a little more persuading, because Benjamin, that was their king. Their man was from Benjamin. So, yeah, there's a little resentment, I think, being carried over. So he has a lot of anger, and he's probably hearing about this and just saying, "This is why. This proves that you were guilty. Everything's happening because of your guilt." Even though we know it, he wasn't even there. David was continually on the run. But this is the way people view things at times, don't they? I mean, they don't. Yeah, they don't get both sides of the story. But what I think is interesting is that what does David? When David sees, he doesn't respond the way you would think um, that he would when he was younger. He might have just killed him. And so, yeah, yeah, he's blaming him for all those woes. Now, but he does say something that's interesting. He says, "Cursed." He says that you have blood on your hands. The kingdom, that see your evil is on you, or you are a man of blood. So there is something that's a part of it that he's right. Now the nephew of David, he then fires back and he's like upset. He goes, "So then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, 'Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take his head off.' But the king said, 'What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? And if he is cursing because the Lord is said to him, Curse David, then who is to say, Why have you done so?' David said to Abishai and to his servants, 'Behold, my own son seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him be accursed, for the Lord has told him to.'" The only, yeah, there's a little bit of a interesting expression, isn't there? The way he says it. I mean, I get it when he curses him and says to him that he says, "Your evil is on you, for you are a man of blood." Okay, yeah, he is, and that's really what all this is coming about on him, isn't it? It goes all the way back to Uriah. Nathan said, "The sword's going to stay in your house." The rest of this is false. Um, but there's a part of this that all of this that's happening to you about Absalom is because of you, David, and because you have blood on your hands. Now, the first part of that is, I think, personal. Just, you know, him loving Shimei, loving Saul. But so I don't know. I mean, I think maybe David could sense that there's a part of what he was saying was truthful, even though he had no responsibility. Um, and I think he's broken. There's a little bit of him being broken spirited that's saying, all of this, all of this is my fault. So even if he threw a false statement among that, over half of that was absolutely right. So I deserve all this. You're absolutely right. But the description of the way that they're marching through here, David has basically what it's saying is those men, those warriors, those bodyguards are lined up on David's left and right guarding him. And there he is. This guy's got the guts to stand out there and help these guys. Remember, these guys are top fighters, warriors. These are like Philistines, some of the guys that I think he met back in Philistia. And they're fighters. And we know that his nephew here, Abishai, he is definitely. I mean, he couldn't. Yeah, because it says because the 200 that are with him at the beginning, back earlier when they were leaving, those were part of his, I guess the emperors had them, most kings have them. They're like a personal bodyguard. And that's who those Kershites were. They were listed earlier. And I wouldn't have picked that up if I hadn't have studied and looked at who they were and where they came from. And so these guys, when it says here, um, right there, see right there, it says the mighty men were on his, in verse 6, on his right hand and his left hand. Those mighty men are listed. There's 30 of them that were the mighty men of war that were with him from the beginning. So these guys, they're pretty bold. Very, very. To sit and watch David take this had to also be humiliating for them to watch their king being berated like that. But David turns to him and says, "No, just let this happen." What would that do to the morale of people around him, around David, if they saw the king allowing that to happen to him? Yeah. What? You giving in? Are you quitting? Yeah, we're taking this from this crazy. He calls him a dog, doesn't he? He goes, "This dead dog. Why are we letting this dead dog do this to the king?" Um, so two encounters. One is a traitor that's trying to mask himself as somebody that's loyal. Then we have one that's coming out from the house of Saul, or not directly with the house, but from Benjamin, and blasting David while he's traveling, and brings that upon him. More insult to injury as he goes along here. Um, so he So anyway, so now we come to the point in verse 15. We're kind of moving down now to where Absalom enters Jerusalem. So we're going to start there in 15 through 19. Now Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel. Ahithophel is the advisor that was with David and very loyal, and now he's lined up with Absalom. Now look what it says. It says, Absalom, all the people, the men of Israel. So the men of Israel are the 10 northern tribes. Absalom already has Judah. So what we have here is a picture of a united tribe, the tribes being united in this effort. Now, Hushai, the Archite, remember, he's the one that David sent back. He's a priest, he's a prophet, or as he's called during this time, a seer. And so let's go and pick up 16 there. And then Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom. Hushai said to Absalom, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" And Absalom said to Hushai, "Is this your loyalty to your friend?" In other words, he's kind of sarcastic. It's kind of like, wait a minute, what type of loyalty? Your friend, he's talking about David. Is this your loyalty to your dad? You coming here and standing before me? And Absalom said, so he said, "Are you showing this type of loyalty?" And Hushai said to Abraham, "No, for whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel have chosen, his I will be, and with him I will remain. And again, whom shall I serve? Should it not be his son? As I have served your father, so I will serve you." So this gets him in to help to counter Ahithophel's advice. That's exactly what David was wanting, why he sent him back. And so Absalom, he just brings him right in, because once we jump to chapter 17, we start to see now, what do we do? How do we proceed? And I'm going to stop there because we've got a lot more material as well to go through. So we have a good time. If you're there, you want to ask some question. I see we've got some people there with us online streaming. So if you have some comments about it, suggestions, complaints, whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Hushai, or Hushai, I'm going to call him Hushai. Hushai is a prophet. He's a priest. So he would be kind of silly to reject him and not receive him. And yeah, and what a great line. What a great line. I mean, that shows if you are Absalom, you're feeling a little insecure as you start to take power. And then as you're sitting there listening and you're doing you just arrived back in the city, you want to unite things. You want to get them under control. And one of them is the spiritual side. Get accepted by God. He's got the ark. He's got a prophet now. He's got his dad's closest advisor. What else could go wrong? So, well, y'all are pretty quiet out there. What's that? Yeah, you're gonna jump ship. I love the way he says though. He's saying it. I mean, why not? I'm not here to serve a man. I'm here to serve God and God's people. So your dad was God anointed. You are now going to take power. So it's natural. I think it's a good, reasonable statement for him to make. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut the class a little short. Usually sometimes we go long. Don't see any comments. I left it open for some time to discuss. So again, next week we're going to pick up in chapter 17. I hope that you'll join us Friday morning for the podcast at 10 o'clock. Search for the church in shape of the scripture. And if you want to join us on Zoom or anything like that, shoot me an email so we can get you set up. If I don't see anything else, well, we'll see you guys later.